Good evening, members. Thank you for your patience while we resolve some of the webcasting issues, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Democracy Committee here on the 16th of November. I have been advised to remind you of the procedure if there is a fire drill. If the fire alarm does go, and we are not expecting it to go, then Poppy to my right, to your left, will go and ascertain what the situation is, and provided we're not all burnt to death beforehand, we will evacuate the building. I'm also reminded to remind you that we are live on the webcast on Maidstone Borough Council website for those who wish to watch us from the comfort of their own homes, and this is working now, which is helpful. So we are being webcast. Is there anyone else here who is recording the meeting or planning to record the meeting? I'll take that as a no, considering the puzzled looks over there, and we will move on to agenda item 1. Apologies for absence. I don't believe we received any. No apologies, which is helpful. So agenda item 2, there are, as a result, no substitute members, which is helpful too. Agenda item 3, notification of visiting members. I can see some in the audience. Do you want to come up to the microphone and explain who you are and which item you want to speak on, please?
Councillor Shalina Prendergast, I reserve my right to speak on agenda items 11 and possibly 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendergast. Councillor Willis.
Hello. Councillor James Willis, agenda item 12.
Thank you, Councillor Willis. Councillor Cumming.
Councillor Mike Cumming, visiting member, reserve my right to speak on items 11 and 12, but please bear with me. I need to keep my telephone on because I may have to leave early as my wife isn't well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cumming. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. Could you or somebody clarify for me? It was my understanding that when members came as a visiting member, that we no longer had, that they were allowed to reserve their right, and we should be told on what they're going to speak on. I think people are agreeing with me the other side of the room as well.
I think, if my recollection is correct, and I'm sure one of the officers will tell me if this is not the case, as all the visiting members indicated which items they wish to speak on, as we come up to those items on the agenda, they will be able to speak on it. Now, should they wish at that point not to say anything, then they are well within their rights to do so. Is my understanding, is that correct, Donna?
Yes, it's to stop somebody coming forward and saying they reserve their right to speak on any item on the agenda. So as long as the agenda item is specified, that's fine.
I did put it on. Could you tell me whether that means then that they would speak prior to the committee? Yes. I'm getting nods.
Yes, I understand.
That's okay.
As normal.
Okay.
Super. We will move on to agenda item 4, which is disclosures by members and officers. Does anyone have any disclosures to make? No. I do, I'm afraid, on agenda item 8, which is the polling station review. As one of the ward councillors, I made my views clear at the time of the consultation, so I will be withdrawing from the meeting at that point, and the Vice Chair, Councillor Fissenden, will be taking the chair for agenda item 8. That's okay. Agenda item 5, disclosures of lobbying. Do we have any disclosures of lobbying on any item on the agenda tonight? None. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to buck the trend again and mention that I've been lobbied on item 10. If that's okay. Agenda item 6 is to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I intend to take all items as public, if the committee are happy to accept that. So as a yes, good, brilliant. Agenda item 7 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of September 2016, which are starting at page 1 on your agendas in front of you. Does anyone have any issues with these minutes, and can I take them as read? I've got 2 hands go up to my right. I'll start with Councillor Revel and then Councillor Newton, if that's okay.
Yes, I noticed from my notes from last meeting on page 3, item 29, on the last sentence at the bottom. It was requested that, I think it was requested by Councillor Viziard, and I wouldn't like him to be deprived of the privilege of having his name recorded in the minutes as such.
It's not going to go. That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make an amendment there to say it was requested by Councillor Vizard that the overview and scrutiny report, etc. If that's okay. Councillor Newton.
Thank you. On page 3, we've got that formal involvement in the following outside bodies be ceased. Well, I don't recall the Maidstone Cycling Forum and the Medway Valley Line Steering Group being included in that at the last meeting.
This is a direct lift of what was on the committee papers as the recommendation to cease on those outside bodies.
I actually don't recall that, because I wouldn't have voted against. It says 9-4. I wouldn't have supported that.
It is... Sorry, do you want to come back, Don? Okay. I'm being reminded that we do have an item on the agenda relating to the item there. My recollection is that this in front of us is correct. I see 2 other hands going up. Are this related to this specific point or on another item? If they are, then I'll take Councillor Joy, then Councillor... No, I'll please allow me. You go first.
Right. My understanding of this, and I did go to the committee clerk, Tessa Ware, when the papers came out. I'm exactly the same as you, because when I looked at the minutes, and it got street pastors and things in there that are really well used in Maidstone, I was horrified that I'd been part of saying that I was agreeing that they should go. My understanding now is, and I could be wrong, is it going to full council anyway before any decision is made? So I'd like a bit of clarification as Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Joy, I think that's the reason why we have the report on the agenda tonight. We have a report on later on outside bodies because I think there was confusion at the meeting. And when we reviewed the report after the meeting, I looked at it when I looked at the decision going to full council, it became clear that I don't think members had all the information when they made the decision. And some of the comments tonight on this minute is probably valid for later on when you look at what you want to do, whether you still want to go to council with that decision, but that's the committee's choice. So that's for you to debate later. I think the minutes reflect what happened at the meeting, which was a section of the report was put forward, which was delete this list of outside bodies, and it got voted through. And I think not all members were aware of necessarily of everything they were voting on from the discussion. So perhaps we can look at that later. All right.
Thank you, Angela. I think that's very helpful. Do you still want to come back, Councillor Vizard?
Thank you, Chairman. I think that we believe that we're all under the impression that it was a genuine sweeping statement that was made in respect of that they should be reviewed, and obviously the officers, or they were going to approach the outside bodies to see if they still wanted to be part of the council's representatives. And I think that's where it was left, not that we were going to just sweep them away completely. It was to be looked at to see if they were still needed.
Don, do you want to come in at this point?
Well, at the meeting, the recommendation was approved. That was what was carried, and the recommendation was for those outside bodies to be recommended to cease.
If there's no other points from any members that are forthcoming, bearing in mind what Angela's just said about the item forthcoming on the agenda, can we take the minutes of the meeting as read then? If that's okay? Super. I will sign them later. Now, we come to agenda item 8, which is the report of the head of Policy and Communications. However, what I failed to mention at the start, and I do apologise for this, is that I was actually going to intend to take agenda item 11 first, because we have Ben Forbes here who's coming to present on this, and I thought it would be a bit unfair of us to let Ben sit through the whole meeting until we got to agenda item 11. So apologies for not mentioning this at the start. This is entirely my fault. But if the committee are happy, we will take agenda item 11 and then we will revert to the normal agenda. Is that agreed by everyone? Agreed? Super. Fantastic. In that case, we will go to agenda item 11, which is the report of the Head of Policy and Communications for yearly elections report. I will hand over to Ben Forbes first, if that's okay. And do you want to make your presentation, Ben? Thank you.
Hello there, my name is Ben Forbes. I work for the Mid-Kent GIS team, that's the Geographical Information Systems team. I specialise in spatial analysis, and I have been asked to provide an estimate for how the number of electorates will change within the borough as a result of the 5-year housing trajectory. I would like to go over my method. I like to make things as transparent as possible. First thing I did was obtain an anonymous version of the containing a unique identifying number representing a person and containing a unique property reference number representing the property in which they live. The unique property reference number comes from a system called the LLPG, which is the Local Land and Property Gazetteer, which is a definitive address database maintained by the GIS team as a statutory requirement. The quality of this is checked by an external body called Geoplace. Maidstone's database is currently being maintained at the highest standard, which is gold. On the electoral roll, there are 112,716 people. Using the unique property reference number, I was able to extract easting and northing coordinates for each person, so I was accurately able to identify where the person lived without knowing anything else about them. I was then able to do a count of the number of electors per ward. If I can ask you to turn to page 27 in your notes. We have a rather boring spreadsheet. You're more than welcome to read it at your leisure. I would like to just point out a couple of the extreme ends of this spreadsheet. In terms of the highest electorate, the Bearsted, Boxley, East, Fant, High Street and South are amongst the highest, all with over 6,000 members. And the lowest are Sutton, Valence and Langley, North Downs, Luce, Leeds, Bolton, Monchelsea and Chart Sutton and Barming, all with under 2,000 people. Another way of representing this data that I chose... Oh, sorry. Yeah. Another way I chose of representing this data was to work out the average number of electors. This is working on the assumption that the 112,000 people were completely evenly split amongst the 26 wards. Now, I realise that this is completely unlikely to happen, but it's another way of representing the data to give you some idea. If that were to be the case, there would be 4,335 people per ward. The biggest outliers to this trend are South Ward, with 2,448 people more than the average, and Leeds, with 2,543 people below the average, just to give you some idea. The other method that I chose to represent this data was working out electorate density by dividing the number of people by the area. The outliers here are the East Ward, which have 3,808 people per square kilometre, and the North Downs, which have 28 people per square kilometre. So that gives you some idea of electorate density. Now, I specialise in spatial and in maps, so it would be remiss of me not to include some. The first map I've included, which we have varying levels of success with the printing. The oranges and the reds look very similar on the printout, but they're a bit more distinguishable on the screen. As I said, the outliers being Bearsted, Boxley, East, Fant, High Street and South are the most heavily populated in terms of electorate. And Barming, Bourton-on-Chelsea and Chart Sutton, Leeds, Luce, North Downs, Sutton, Valence and Langley being the lowest. Now, I don't think any of us are really surprised by those figures, the largest number of electorate being in and around the town centre and moving outwards. The deviation from the average is broadly the same as the map that we just looked at before. The only real change is towards the east of the town centre. The one that is the most interesting, I feel, is the next map, which is the number of electorate per kilometre. Here we can see that there are some real outliers, the East, High Street and Shepway South ward being by far the most densely packed in terms of electorate, with some moderate and medium densities in the surrounding areas, and then the further out from the town centre we go, the less dense the density becomes. So that is the electorate as it stands as of the 12th of October. Now, I was also provided with a 5-year trajectory which contained, which contained 373 applications or allocations. This 5-year plan plans to deliver 7,024 properties. Using the coordinates for the centre of these applications, I was able to plot which wards they are likely to affect. We know the number of properties that we're expected, but we're expecting that these new properties will contain 1.8 voters. And that is based on a figure that I was given. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of the person who provided me with that. He's gone now, he left. He left the day we had the meeting. There we go, yeah. Okay. So I multiplied the expected to be delivered properties by 1.8 to get the number of expected voters. I have also taken a report I found that suggests that the current rate of development is 16 houses per acre, which equals approximately 250 square metres per housing plot. And from this, I was able to reverse the formula for a circle to produce polygons that are of the approximate size that the development will entail. And from these polygons, I was able to determine which ward boundaries these developments are likely to cross. I would like to state that this is a very rough method of doing so. However, the more detailed way of doing so would be a large amount of work. And should this project go ahead, that would be the time to do a more in-depth analysis. Okay, on the next page is my findings of that analysis. I estimate that the two most heavily impacted wards as a result of these developments are High Street and Parkwood, each receiving approximately 1,430 properties each. The total numbers, however, are not identical because I estimate that the most heavily impacted electors are going to be in High Street and in South. The deviation from the new average of 4,821, the biggest outlier being South, which is nearly 2,000 greater than that average, and the extreme other end would be the North Downs, which is nearly 3,000 below that average. In terms of electorate density, the new outstander is the High Street ward with over 4,000 electorates per square kilometre, and North Downs remains the least densely packed with 30 per square kilometre. Again, I have represented that information spatially on some maps. The first map on page 33 is the polygons I produced based on the number of properties per application, the size and colour indicating the number of properties that are expected to be delivered. Here you can see there that Park Wood has a very large red circle in it indicating that between 400 and 500 properties are being delivered in that area. There are a few oranges spread around the place, but the majority of them tend to be smaller, more dispersed developments. This is the estimated 5-year increase. Here we can see High Street and Park Wood are the outliers, expecting to receive over 1,250 new electors each. Now, this is very difficult to see on your notes because the oranges and the reds do bleed very much together. However, the two outliers in terms of the biggest increase in electorate totals are South and the High Street, and everything that surrounds those is a very dark orange or a medium orange, indicating that they're a little bit on the middling side. This is the new deviation from the 4,821. Broadly the same as the map I showed earlier. However, we're now starting to see that the averages are starting to shift more towards the Coxheath and Hunton and Marden and Yalding areas. They're starting to get a bit more densely populated. And as of the new calculations for electorate density, the High Street becomes the main standout, becoming the most densely populated. Okay. Now, using the polygons that I produced, I've identified the applications most likely, but not necessarily likely, to cross existing ward boundaries. The problem here being that we could see a new development built where the existing ward boundary was to cut through the middle of a road. So you'd have some people on that road in one ward and some in another. This isn't a guarantee, of course. More work would need to be done. However, I would just like to highlight the top 5, in my opinion. This is application 14/506264. This is estimated to deliver between 100 and 200 properties, and the orange lines that you can see represent the existing ward boundaries. Now, depending on whether or not this application intends to build on both sides of the road, we could see this development cut in half by the existing ward boundary. This application actually is right on the corner of 3 separate wards, so we could see quite a bit of dispersal there. On this application, we're expected to see between 200 and 300 new houses, and the ward boundary appears to follow something of an unmade track. Again, were the application to be across, we can expect to see this development cut in half by the existing ward boundary. Again, this development is rather close to 3 separate ward boundaries. So, again, depending on the specifics of that application, we could see properties from there ending up within 3 separate wards. And this application in particular is, I believe this application is one of the oldest and is nearing the most complete out of any of them. And there is a neighbouring application which effectively forms part of the same estate. Fortunately, those fields are already cut by the existing ward boundary. However, when you have 2 new applications going in producing effectively the same estate, it may be worth considering whether or not that whole estate should be within a single ward. And that's my piece. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ben. Before we come to questions, Councillor Prendergast indicated that she'd like to address the committee on this particular item. Do you want to have your 3 minutes, Councillor Prendergast?
Thank you, Chairman, members, Mr Forbes, for an excellent presentation. I'm going to keep this really brief. I've just got two very simple points. I note here on point 2.1, it says, councillors were also informed at the first meeting that a change to the system of elections would also require a boundary review. This committee has obviously been charged with looking into this following your July meeting, and from what I can see, it's a job half done. The Boundary Commission for the Local Government Boundary Commission is also very clear that one goes with the other. You can't do one without the other. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's a job half done, and I think we should have a proper review done into this, including the boundary review, before we take it to full council. My second point, and I'm a little bit shocked about this. I see that when a public consultation was last done, 71.7% of the respondents voted for 4 yearly elections. And as a new member, I'm really, really shocked to see that the full council voted against this. I'm not sure what this says about democracy, but again, I'd like to see this job done properly and for this committee to do what it's been charged with. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Prendergast. And you made a point that I was going to say, which is obviously we've heard a lot about boundaries and so on and so forth. And as you mentioned, this is, although the committee has been tasked to look into 4 yearly elections because of local government boundary commission requirements, it all forms part of the same overarching thing. I have Councillor Fissenden first indicating to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Just the results on the number of voting that was just brought up, the 71.7%. That's out of how many people?
You can see on front of you there was 22,907 who said yes, 9,033 who said no, so total of 31,000.
That's not like the whole population of Maidstone, is it? So that's just taken a little corner of it.
Of course you could...
I know.
Hold on, thank you, Councillor Revel. Thank you, Councillor Revel. What I'd say is that you could interpret that as you wish, but some people may think that nearly 32,000 people participating is a lot. Some may think it's less. Does anyone else have any points to make on this item? If not, then, obviously the recommendation for the committee is to note the progress of the committee's review of 4 yearly elections. And as you can see from page 23 in front of you, we will be continuing. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Fissenden, did you want to say something else before I move on?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chairman. A report was done, a very good report was done, 2008 to 2009 on the elections review. It's a very, very thorough report, and really, I don't think we should be bringing this up now. I think there's more important matters to discuss, and I think we should put this to bed, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Councillor Ring.
I'm all for trying to get round figures, but we are now in 2016. 8 to 9 seems a very, very long time ago. And I think with our Brexit results and extra, I think people are getting a lot wiser to what goes on in politics. So I wouldn't like to see it left. We're trying to encourage people to vote, and I feel we should take it forward in one form to be able to take to full council and get every councillor to vote. That's just how I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ring. Councillor Vizard.
Mr Chairman, as was pointed out from the minutes of the last meeting that we had, I did request that everybody on the committee had or were prevailed with the viewing of the scrutiny report that was presented to us in 2010. Unfortunately, yesterday I was away from my machine and I didn't get my machine put on. this actually popped into my inbox yesterday. I've not been available today. And obviously there's a 30-page report that was there. And not having had the time to look at it, I'm not really happy to debate it or vote on what we've got presented to us until I have the opportunity to look at that full report. And I don't know how many of the other councillors here had the opportunity to see the review that was there. So from my point of view, I'm not content with voting. At this stage, I would sooner just put it back for a little while until I've had the opportunity to read the reports that were given to us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Vizard. After you made the request at last meeting, as we've discussed, and I agreed, believe it was, in fact, I can remember it being circulated by the previous clerk in the day or two afterwards. I don't know if any other members remember receiving that as requested. I certainly got it. And then it was obviously circulated in advance of this meeting again on Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. Obviously, how much weight one gives to a report from a few years ago is up to each individual member to decide. That's my view. Obviously, this report is for noting only, to note the progress of the committee's review of 4 yearly elections. We are not deciding today whether to accept anything. What this committee is merely being asked to do is to ask whether to proceed with the work it is doing and come back on the 8th of March with its final report. Councillor Joy.
Could you then clarify for me, at the top of the report, it says it's a final decision and it has a yes in the box?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that is correct, because it's the final decision on the recommendations in this report, and the recommendation in the report is to note the progress of the committee's review. It's not so, I know it sounds pedantic, but if this was saying the next stage is X, Y, Z, then I would have said, no, it's not the final, but it's just to note the interim.
Thank you very much, Angela. If there's no other members wishing to speak, I will proceed to the vote then. And that is, and I'm happy to propose that we note the progress of the committee's review of 4 yearly elections ahead of coming back with a final report on the 8th of March 2017. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Ring, thank you very much. In that case, can I take a vote on that recommendation? All of those in favour, please. And those against?
3 against.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry, 4 against.
No, 5. Okay, 5 against. In that case, that is lost. So we need to propose something else. If anyone has a form of words which they'd like to propose.
Only just to say that no further action is taken at this time.
Fissenden got there first. In that case, it's been put by Councillor Joy and seconded by Councillor Fissenden that no further action be taken on the 4 yearly elections report. Can I have all of those in favour of that, please? That's 5. And those against? That's 4. In that case, that is carried and no further action will be taken on the 4 yearly elections report. Ben, thank you very much for all your work into this and for giving such an informative and useful presentation. I think it's fair to say that we've all learnt a lot from what you've just said to us and revealed stuff that we certainly did not know before. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. At this point, we revert back to the agenda as per the agenda that was published, and we'll move on to item 8, the report of the Head of Policy and Resources, the polling station review. At this point, I will leave the room and hand over to Councillor Fissenden.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, the review of St Michael's School polling station. The report makes the following recommendations to this committee: to recommend to Council changing the polling station in Front Ward from St Michael's School to Grange Moor Hotel. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak on this matter? Councillor Joy.
I don't know if anyone else is interested, but generally it's a school, a village hall. It just, when I saw the Grangemore, I was thinking cost, and I was thinking as well about it being private because of it being a hotel and people around, so I wasn't quite sure how that was going to fit with things.
Angela, do you want to?
We do have polling stations at other venues. We have some in pubs, for example, and some we have to pay for mobile stations. I will have to go away and find out for you the cost. The implication I got from the team was that it was neutral, and obviously we claim the cost back in terms of when we pick a venue. I think from the school's perspective, it's that not closing the school for the day to be a polling station is quite a big concern. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. I can find that out and circulate it to the members so you've got that information.
Just to say, I'm quite happy with that. I don't want to make a big fuss about it. It was just a real question as to, because it was such a different venue, I just queried it. So if you can just let me know, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Wynne.
Just to say, I think using these small schools, and it is very small school, and no parking, but also the children have so many different days and parents working now, at least they wouldn't be suffering this. And I was just looking at all the cross-cutting issues and implications, and they all sound very positive that it's been looked at. It is safe. It's got disability entrances, etc. So I just passed that we pass this. We change a venue and go from there. I just don't think it deserves big debate.
Are you prepared to second that, Councillor Newton? Councillor Hinder.
No, Marion's already said what I was going to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We go to the vote, please. Go to the vote on the recommendation to change the polling station in Front Ward from St Michael's School to Grange Moor Hotel. Can we have everybody in favour of that, please? It's unanimous votes. Thank you.
Thank you, members. I'm back. We'll move on to... Thank you, Councillor Fiston, for taking the chair as well. We'll move on to agenda item 9, which is the report of the Head of Policy and Communications on the webcasting service on page 9 of your agenda in front of you. I'll hand over to Angela Woodhouse. Angela.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to go through the whole report because I would trust you've read it. As the committee responsible for reviewing the Council's constitution and determining matters relating to democratic services, responsibilities and functions, this report outlines the installation of the new system and the potential for the future, including looking at voting. The system does have voting capability, and members, councillors are asked to consider if you wish this to be utilised in the future. If you do, this will require a change to the Constitution, so a recommendation will have to be made to Council. And I think the report, it outlines at 3.1 and 3.2 the options and different things you could consider. So it's really up to you, committee, and for you to debate and decide what you want to do.
Thank you very much, Angela. Now, coming round, for heading round the room, are options which relate to the report about perhaps how the webcasting service could be better used from the viewer's point of view, for those people who are watching the webcast. It wouldn't alter any of the recommendations in front of us this evening. Angela, do you want to talk through them while members receive them in front of them?
Yeah, apologies for circulating these at the meeting. Normally we'd have it in advance, so apologies for that. Basically, what you've got in front of you is showing you how it will look to the people at home and what they will see. So on one of these, you basically end up with a committee seating plan that would flash up with the vote, and it would change colour according to how people have voted. Now, interestingly, from the chairman's perspective as well, you get to see who hasn't voted at all. So the chairman gets a bit more control in terms of saying, oh, Councillor Joy, you haven't voted yet, can you vote, or whoever it is. So it gives a bit more, it's more transparent and it's easier to see. What I would say, if members still want to raise their hands, that's totally appropriate as well, and some members may wish to do that, so it's visible in two ways. The other thing you get come up is a pie chart, which will show the public the overall decision, and it will come up. It can record it by name, but that would only happen if you've requested a recorded vote, as it does now. So it wouldn't go into the minutes. You just have the usual, 7-4, 2 against, whatever it is. And it would be able to include abstentions as well. The other display is just another way it can be shown. So again, this has the name of what you were voting on, the status of the vote, and then how people have voted. And again, it's just the numbers overall, but you can also show a seating plan for added transparency. So it's just whether you want to utilise the system or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I've got Councillor Revel first, and then I'll come to Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Revel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This looks almost fine. It's a little bit unclear. Do we actually see this in action before we approve it? I always feel that is necessary with technical advances.
I'm assured that we can.
I can't do it right now, but I could do. I'm happy to run a demonstration, and we could arrange a time when members can come and have a look and see what it looks like, maybe before a committee meeting. Definitely, if this goes to council, we can definitely, before it goes to council, so any member can come and see what it's going to look like. You can go on to other websites. For example, Brighton and Hove use it, so it might be worth looking on their website to look at how the vote goes through and how it looks to a member of the public. But I know what you mean in terms of coming and seeing which button you press and what happens. That's fair enough.
I've got Councillor Fissenden next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify on the Twitter. The Twitter is widely used by local authorities, government departments and leading organisations across the world as a tool for engagement and to encourage disclosure. I just want to clarify that we're not going to be getting into a Twitter debate while the meetings are taking place.
I can assure you there's no recommendation, unless the committee feels otherwise, for us to conduct our business on Twitter. But what I have agreed to is coming round as an example of how it works at Brighton and Hove, which Poppy's circulating at the moment. I know it's another bit of paper, but it's, this is just an example of what you'll see, really. Councillor Ring, I have you next. Do you want to speak?
Oh. I'm sorry, once again, I think we're making all a big fuss about it, and I'll be the last one about technology. I'm doing my best. But at the end of the day, all you're asking me is, instead of sticking my hand in the air, you want me to put yes, no, or abstain. So, and even though I've got bad eyes and I hope it lights up, because I'll be pressing the wrong button all the time, it's there, isn't it? Yes? No. OK, then. So all I'm saying is, why aren't we just moving on this? There's just no fuss.
Thank you, Councillor Ring. I've got Councillor Vizard, then Joy, and then Lewins. Oh, you've not? OK. I'll have Vizard and then Councillor Lewins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's when Councillor Friston brought this up, the Twitter implications there. Obviously, we don't need to get into debates about this when committees are going on, but will this be a cut-off the same as we normally do? If anyone wants to come in and represent or sit down, it's cut off before the debates carry on, because obviously we don't need Twitter going on while we're here. That's, that's a concern that we have, I think.
I'll hand over to Angela.
Well, we won't be using Twitter in that way. If we were to introduce Twitter as a way of doing democratic engagement, for example, I know some councils use it to have questions, then we would put in rules and procedures so everyone's clear on how we're using it. I quite like a bit of engagement, but I understand the reservations and how it could, with politics. But that's a demonstration to show you what it could look like, how it could work. But yeah, that's something that this committee could look at in the future if we were going to be a bit more progressive.
I think, in fact, I'll come to Councillor Lewins first. Sorry.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Actually, Brian, Councillor Vizard, has just actually asked the same question as myself, because I was concerned that there wasn't going to be a cut-off point, that there wasn't going to be a deadline, that committee meetings would be extended until... But thank you, it's clarified that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I don't think we want committee meetings any longer unless we can avoid them. I think, speaking personally from the Chair, if I may, at this point, so I've got no one else indicating, it's quite simple what we're being asked to do here. Obviously, note the updates and the installation to the webcasting service, which has already happened. And then on paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2, we have two possible options. It could be that the committee goes for whichever one it feels necessary, in all honesty. But, of course, my own personal view, if I can say so, is that if we have the ability to vote via the buttons, and it makes it clearer to those people watching on the webcasting service, and I think we should take that, particularly as there's no implication in terms of how the vote is recorded in the minutes of a meeting, and the minutes will still say for a number, against a number, and a number of abstentions. That's just my personal view. Councillor Vizard, I've got you coming back, if you want to.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think exactly what you're saying there is appropriate. Obviously, as the Chairman, you need to have control over who hasn't voted, but if it's not being recorded from that point of view, unless it's a named vote, then it has to be.
Super. Thank you very much, Councillor Vizard. I've got no more members indicating to speak in that case. In that case, we obviously have two recommendations on page 9 in front of us to note the updates on the installation of the webcasting service and to recommend that the Council use the webcasting voting system to ensure transparency and accuracy at meetings. Obviously, within the report, we then have 3.1 and 3.2. Unless anyone is willing to move something from the floor, in which I see nobody willing to do so far, I would like to recommend that we agree the recommendations on the papers in front of us, which would include perhaps trialling this, and doing a demonstration for this system here on the portrait page in front of us to see how that would work. Is that seconded by Councillor Vizard? I'm glad to see. In that case, I will move to a vote then. Can I have all of those in favour, please? I think that's unanimous. We are voting the old-fashioned way with our hands, but of course we will not be pressing the button yes, but now we will. So thank you very much for that, members, and we will move on to the next item on our agenda in front of us, which is agenda item 10 on page 15 of the reports, which regards the Courier Run review. I'll again hand over to Angela Woodhouse. Angela.
Thank you, Chairman. So the committee requested early in the year, when they set their work programme, that the finance team carry out a review of the courier service. The finance team have considered the cost of printing and delivering agendas and the use of electronic devices, and that's set out in the report. The committee is asked to review the options identified so far to see if further work needs to be conducted or whether a decision can be made tonight on how the service is delivered going forward. No option has been recommended to the committee, as this was not felt appropriate. For example, it could be the committee believes a member survey may be needed to work out which option to take forward. It could be you look at all the options and you discount some and then put some in. So it's really for you to decide how to take this forward, because this is very much a member function and it's a function of the Democracy Committee. So again, if you make a decision, it sits with this committee. So open to debate, I guess.
Thank you very much, Angela. Do I have any members indicating to speak on the reports in front of us. Councillor Fissenden.
Yes, after looking through the report, there was one thing I wanted to pick up, and that was if I can find it now. Oh, where's it gone? Sorry. Oh, that's it. Maidstone Borough Council debt recovery is in need of a van, so they could take this over if it was no longer needed. Possibilities of maybe looking at the car instead of the van. We can book a car out rather than implement the cost of a van.
Okay. Do you want to say
As an option, maybe.
I can take that back to the service. I assume they've got something happening already. There is a request for a van. I don't know the ins and outs of why they need a van. Maybe it's something to do with debt recovery. They like a van, but I will take that away and talk to the service, and I'll offer that forward as a suggestion, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Councillor Vizard.
Mr. Chairman, if our courier run is running on a Friday, as it is now, and the van is going begging, cannot the debt recovery use it Monday to Thursday?
It seems logical to me, but perhaps Angela can take that back to her discussions with debt recovery and raise the points, because it does seem a logical solution. Councillor Revel.
Oh, this is new stuff, isn't it? Sorry about that. I'm looking at on 2.6, estimated cost of providing the courier run, and it seems you have no amount of money here put in for labour cost in that, and obviously that is really the highest cost of the performance. Well, I see you've got something called a 0.22 FTE. Translate that into money.
If you could, Angela,
would be much easier and
helpful.
much more accessible to us, I think.
Apologies for that, so I can see where you're coming from. The reason why we didn't put in a cash amount is because you can't actually save 0.22 of a post. You can't take that out of a role. It becomes an efficiency. It works out about £3,000, but I can circulate the exact figure to you so you've got it. But it would actually be very difficult to take someone's job down by that amount because of all the other work they're doing and how that role operates. But I can give you the exact amount, but it's about £3,000.
Councillor Revel.
It's gone off again. Yes, I think you have to put that costing in because you can't look at this in isolation from other departments, because you might find that 5 departments in whole have 0.22, which means you save one whole person. So you don't have to recruit one person. And if you're looking at this, not only with this item, but for the council as a whole, in a time when we need to make savings, then we do need to look at giving value for money for hard-working taxpayers. And we not only must do it, but we must be shown to be doing it. And I think, I would like to have that as a costing put in, even if it's only 1/5 or point. I don't know quite how you got to 0.22, but half a man or. Yes, as my grandmother used to say, 1 boy, 2 boys, half a boy, 3 boys, no boy at all. Overmanning is, you always have to look at that, even in local government.
Thank you, Councillor Revel. And I think your point is noted by the officers, and a figure in pounds and pence will be circulated. Councillor Joy, I've got you next down to speak.
Thank you. On page 20, the cross-cutting issues and implications. Staffing, so it's sort of touching on what's just been said. I couldn't see anywhere in the report the implications of the staffing implications of changing the staff activities of what they're doing, because isn't that going to have an impact as well?
Go on, Angela.
It's exactly that 0.22. So if we have, it's a civic officer role. So the civic officers currently, on a Friday, we have 2 civic officers. This takes a certain amount of time, which is why it's 0.22, because it's so many hours out of a full week that they spend on the courier run. Now, you could decide to try and reduce the hours, or you could reallocate. So that officer may now be put to use doing something else we need to be done, rather than doing the courier run. That's the staffing implications, because there'll be a change in their duties, because they'll no longer be required to undertake the courier run, if you went for that option.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Joy?
More.
Yeah.
And then on page 19, under the bullet points, I've sort of counted them down, and it was 6. It says committee meetings could be used to distribute agendas to save postal costs, blah, 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 attending the offices to collect the papers. I assume those that don't live locally then, there would still be a cost implication because of travel expenses for people that, you know, that don't walk into the offices and don't walk to meetings.
The idea is we take advantage of the fact someone's already in, so we give them the papers. So therefore we don't have to do the courier run for those members. The issue is at the moment is the way the route works. Often taking 1 or 2 out doesn't actually reduce the mileage overall, because you've still got to go from A to B, regardless of the points in between. So it's a bit of a... And other councils, for example, have a pigeonhole and no one gets their post delivered. You come and get it as you come in and out for meetings. I think Tunbridge Wells is a council, for example, that does that, and they're fairly rural as well. But it's, you know, horses for courses.
Yes, of course, Councillor Joy.
I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's a perfect way of doing it, as long as the papers are in the cabby hole or whatever you want to call it, because that's my understanding of why they're put through the post, because they're not ready when the courier run comes round with our papers. So that's where the postage cost is coming from, I believe.
I've got Councillor Fissenden next, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Revel. Councillor Fissenden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, again, on page 20, under the risk management, all the options carry risk, and councillors will need to consider this as part of the decision-making process. I just want to know, the risk has not been identified. What is the risk?
That's really for you to consider as part of your decision making, but risks will be things like if we don't send out agendas by courier, people don't get their papers, so they're not well informed when they make decisions. It'll be people not using electronic devices properly. It could be that people then start printing all their papers at home, which costs more than printing if we print it. So there's a number, but each option will carry different risks, and that's something you need to think about when you make your decision. Sorry, I appreciate that's a bit of a big answer, but...
Councillor Revel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've brought to mind that, in fact, I was in a previous council, which was Thurrock, and I was in the rural area. And one of the disadvantages of being in the rural area, it was longer to travel into the council offices than if I was in the urban sector. But then that's one of the disadvantages. But there are so many advantages of living in a rural area, I would discount the disadvantage of having to travel into the centre of town. And of course, if you are the councillor, you should be travelling quite often into the centre of town. And yes, we did have a pigeonhole system, and it worked beautifully, no problem. And I think what used to happen is that if anyone's pigeonhole was full of posts, somebody would bring them up to see if they were all right. And soon that, you know, they would say they hadn't got in, please post them to me, and that would have been done. It worked perfectly, and it was a very cost-effective thing. So say, help the taxpayer who pays the money for these things.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, Councillor Revel. I actually worked at Thurrock Council before you were councillor, and I would agree it did work very well, and it is another sort of bit similar in terms of the distance people had to travel, and it's quite a big area. And you're correct, and we would post out if people requested it, but it was very few, because most people coming in for meetings quite regularly and able to pick up papers when they needed them, or doing it electronically.
Thank you very much, and we will endeavour to be more like Thurrock Council in that case. I've got no other members indicating their wish to speak. Obviously, the committee on the in July this year, it was agreed to undertake this review. Councillor Ring was the champion, I think was the word we used, for this. And the officers and Councillor Ring have brought back 5 options on pages 18 and 19 at the moment, A, B, C, D and E. E is maintaining the current approach. Obviously, D is to go back and look for any other alternatives and solutions. And then we have options A, B and C, which propose some solutions. The recommendations which we've been made is very much for us at this committee to choose which of those 5 options we would like to proceed with. So I just wonder, and I'm throwing this out there to the committee, if anyone would like to propose going with A, B, C, D or E. Councillor Revel.
That probably 3-3 is the one which fits.
Councillor, I'll search the room for ideas and take it from there, if that's right. Councillor Revel.
I'm personally finding it very difficult to sit here and say what I think is the way forward and what isn't. I'd like to see this deferred until we've got more information, because we don't actually know what implications there are here. I know we've got a list of things that could help the situation, but we don't actually know, do we? So I'm finding it very difficult to say that I could vote.
It seems like, Councillor Joy, what you're proposing in effect is option D on paragraph 3.4 to identify other alternatives and solutions which may mix and match some of the ideas in the above options. Perhaps you'd maybe like to articulate for the benefit of the committee which approach you would use to do this. By that, what I mean is, what information do we want to be looked at? Do you set up a working group? Do you say to the officers, can we bring this back to the next committee meeting, but looking specifically at this? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to. Okay. Councillor Vizard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think before. It actually needs to be deferred to get the views of all the councillors. And I think we're all looking to ways of going forward to save money and sensibly save money. But I think what we really need to do is some of the councillors that come in regularly, they can pick up their papers from the office. And some people in the rural areas that are probably not attending, maybe they still need to have a courier run or post. I think it's probably a sensible question of where they would actually like to go with what option would suit them best.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Newton, and then I've got Councillor Hinder, and then Councillor Ring.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I thoroughly support what you're saying there. I think we're tinkering about with something that could have a major effect on individuals. I mean, I work a lot of hours in a day, and others do as well. To have to go in, pick things up, park. It takes me now 50 minutes to drive from Dowswood to East Farley, and that's how bad the traffic is. And all these things have an implication on this to the member. And I would like to see this sort of deferred and more information come back to us and let members choose what they want to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Hinder.
Thank you, Chairman. I do totally agree with Councillor Newton. From someone who lives over the other side in Walderslade, it can sometimes take me an hour to come in here with the amount of traffic, and it's absolutely horrendous. Would I want to come in here to pick up something where I'm going to be using a lot of my time when I could be doing something like council work at home? So I wouldn't be happy. I think if you're going to look at it, then I think councillors should be given the choice. That would be the thing. Do you want it posted? Are you happy to come in and do it that way? I don't think it's necessary to actually have a courier run, but I think councillors should be given the option. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to Councillor Ring next, and then we'll look towards a solution.
Okay, well, you've seen in the document, because that's what we was asked to look at, positive savings, which, if the figures are completely right, it's quite a big amount. But I'm going to ask you, is it Survey Monkey, Survey Monkey, whatever it is? Could we not send that out to every councillor and give them the opportunity, ask these questions, and then I think wait for the answer back to them. But I do think we do need to get smarter on it. You know, I think the biggest thing that I found out when I sat with Angela was how many people have got iPads not even using them. I could not believe, and I did ask the question again, didn't I, just to make up. One, if they're not using it, why have they got them? Because they're not cheap. And the second thing is, sometimes it's quite nice to read it in a bit of peace. So all I'm saying is perhaps we should do that with these options that have come to the committee tonight, all on a Survey Monkey, and let's get some reading backs, and then I'd like to sit with Angela again to come back with new figures, etc., if that's okay.
Yes. Now, thank you, Councillor. In fact, I was going to suggest doing precisely that, and that is that we send out a survey to all councillors to fill in over a certain period of time. So, in effect, what we do is we defer this report in front of us. We send out a survey listing the 5 available options here, as has been said, and then Councillor Rynn, as the champion on this, to sit down with the officers and then come back to the next committee meeting with a clear officer recommendation. In the meantime, if some of the points that have been raised by Councillor Revel with regards to the costing could be identified as well, and the van, that would be helpful. And then I think come this committee's next meeting in January, I believe, we'll be able to make a decision on it, because speaking personally here, I do agree that this is something that does need to be looked at, and that many councils don't have a courier run. And I have to say, when I joined this council just over a year ago, I was absolutely shocked to find that the council funded someone to deliver some papers to my front door. And as a result of that, I don't use my iPad, and I was actually one who returned it. And I think that if you speak to, certainly when I speak to residents in my ward, they're shocked that this is what some of their council tax goes on. But that's just my personal opinion. It's probably not shared by all, but there you go. Councillor Vizard, you wanted to interject, and then what I'll do is I'll go straight from there to a vote on the recommendation from Councillor Ring, seconded by Councillor Fissenden.
Thank you, Chairman. I think if we, as Councillor Ring has said, if we do the Survey Monkey there, and there are these options put there, maybe the councillors ought to put on there some of the ideas that they've got as well, rather than just say, oh, I don't want to do this. It can be achieved by doing this. So put that additional question in there as well.
I think that's, if the committee are in agreement, I think that we can put that additional question on there. Super. I think we're all in agreement. In that case...
Well, no, surely it has to be done by paper, so everyone is covered, and by iPad.
Actually, most of our councillors now, because the councillor we had who didn't do paper is now gone, we would email that survey out, but I would contact group leaders and say, if any of your councillors wish to have a paper copy, please let me know and we'll send it out. But we'd rather have it electronically, because it's much easier to pull together and analyse the results, and keeps it all in one place, preferably. Saves officer time if we can get you guys filling it in. Brilliant.
Fantastic. In that case, I think we're clear on what the recommendation is, and that is to defer the report in front of us pending a member survey electronically, and then for us to come back at the next meeting addressing some of the points raised, and also with a clear officer recommendation based on the results of the survey. Councillor Ring has proposed that. Councillor Fissenden has seconded. Can I take a vote of all of those in favour of that recommendation, please? That's unanimous. Yeah. Unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We proceed now on to the final item of the agenda for this evening's meeting. That is the report of the Head of Policy and Communications, the Outside Bodies Follow-Up Report. It's a busy night for you, Angela. Particularly as you're feeling under the weather. But if you could present on this, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. So following your meeting in September, it was identified that the report and review of outside bodies did not contain all the information needed to make a decision. So in light of this, committee are asked to review their original decision and decide which way forward with this, and there are a number of different options open to you, and again it is a committee decision. And in the report I've outlined, basically we had a number of reports, a number of outside bodies listed in Appendix A, so all the outside bodies were included and they're on your agenda tonight. However, the covering report, which went through and went, okay, we do this with these outside bodies and that with the others, didn't actually include all of those outside bodies. So when you made the decision, you didn't actually consider all of the outside bodies. However, it is up to you how you take this forward. And again, as this is a recommendation to Council, if you do decide to take action, it's Council who will make the final decision. So you're asked to consider and decide what you want to do in light of that.
Thank you very much, Angela. Councillor Willis has been very patient. And do you still wish to address the committee as a visiting member? Super. You have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, when I found out the day after this happened, when I found out this has happened, I could have cried. Because I spend quite a lot of time, there's three outside bodies that I'm involved with. Two of them were on the list. I thought someone was having a go at me. There's two of them. One was the Cycle Forum, and the other one, the other one was the Medway Valley Community Rail Partnership, both of which are mentioned in our ITS. So they're both referred to as something that provide information, or sorry, the Cycle Forum is mentioned in the ITS. The nature of the Medway Valley Railway Community Rail Partnership feeds into our transport strategy and is a very useful. So what I just wanted to ask was, what I wanted to point out is that the recommendation to create a working group to review these outside bodies, if that's what you choose to do, if you do that, then that's great. I don't know how much money it would save actually having the review in the first place, frankly. But would you consider that the ones that were missed off the list, I'd also put, I think my parents are street pastors, and when one of the councillors, they just come home glowing one morning, the day after, telling us how a councillor had been out with them that night, and they were really pleased that someone from Gravesham Council had actually bothered coming to meet to find out what they did as volunteers. So all I'm asking is, if you are going to do something, I think, if you want to continue working on this, I'm not sure how much money it would save at all, frankly, but if you want to continue working on this, there's a lot of good work done by outside bodies, and the positive, a group, so option 2, which is to review appointments to outside bodies. One, can that have people on it from the service committees that should be interacting with these outside bodies, so the 3 service committees, and 2, can we also add the words, perhaps, to create a positive effect? So I was at the SP and ST committee last week, and people on outside bodies reported back to the committee for the first time I've heard it. So from David Burton on the Quality Bus Partnership, Clive on cycling, these are all things that are in our ITS that you probably voted for, Councillor, I would say. So to me, these are really important things that we've worked hard on, that are part of our council's central strategy, that most of us voted through as part of the local plan. And I just ask that we perhaps respect the work people do on these, and either drop the whole thing, that's up to you, or please get a proper review done, and also add the positive effect. I'll leave it at that. So perhaps we can make sure that members of these outside bodies know that they should report back to the relevant committee with what good work they're reviewing or doing. Does that make sense, Chair?
It does. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Councillor Willis. I'll go to a couple of members who've indicated first, and then perhaps we can address some of the points raised in full. Councillor Fissenden.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. After looking into this and reading it, I think we need to probably kind of slow down and do it again. I think maybe we should, I know Tessa put in a lot of work for the outside bodies, and I think that maybe she didn't get a generally great response from some of the outside bodies. Hence, I think that's why our decisions were made, because we hadn't heard from people. So maybe I think we should go another approach and ask the councillors that are actually on those outside bodies what they get from it. Can they make decisions how many times they go to meetings. And again, I think it should go to the relevant service committees as well.
Thank you, Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Ring, and then I'll come to Councillor Hinder.
Okay, I know I'm not the most patient person in the world. Things have changed. I know certain councillors that work really, really hard with outside bodies. They don't advertise it. Do they ask you, as the councillor, this representative of your cycle thing, are you their spokesman for bringing back details and voting on a document where everybody's asked their opinion? Do you come back personally on your cycle forum to say, we want this?
Councillor Rin, it's not really...
I'm going to say what I say anyway, because it isn't going to stop me. Yes, I am so disappointed this wasn't done in the first place. The member of staff has left. I feel we was also let down by legal. No disrespect, because you wasn't doing it at the time. You know, my first question I asked when this was brought up, because you can take me back to documents at 2008. That's too long ago. We ain't scrutiny anymore. We've gone, we've moved on. But the first thing I asked was, before some of these people sat round on this committee, was, could legal go away, look at all our outside bodies to see if we have a legal obligation? That was the starter point. Am I wrong in what I'm saying? It does not cost money. At the end of the day, we should have that information now. Because I've looked down here and I've been a councillor all this time now, and someone keeps chucking them on. But we know nothing about them. So, and I thought it was in the Constitution that some of these bodies did come under our remits. Am I wrong in that?
Angela, do you want to come in on that point?
Oh, sorry, I have a coughing. Thank you, Councillor Ring. I think those are fair points, and I know when I have seen the original report that was prepared, and a lot of work did go into that report, and it did cover the fact that some of those service committees, I know in their terms of reference, do have certain groups that report into them, and they should be reporting back. And I think the report was trying to do the right thing in terms of making it clearer that the outside bodies should be accountable to those service committees, and they should look after them, and that there should be regular reports back. And I know 2008 is a long time ago, but scrutiny raised the same points. They raised the same point in terms of we don't know what's going on these outside bodies, and some councillors are better than others at reporting back. What I would say is the issues you've raised, the issues Councillor Fissenden's raised as well, are all things that could be tackled if you wanted to set up a member working group to look at this. It doesn't have to be huge numbers of you, and it doesn't have to have a huge amount of meetings. It's probably just going through and identifying what information was missing last time, because we did actually survey councillors, we did survey outside bodies, so it's just going through the gaps, trying to get that information filled in and doing the work on the legal side of it, because I think there was an assumption made where we say, oh, you're a trustee or a charity, we have to be appointed. Well, actually, that may not be the case, and I think that's what you're getting at. So we need to look at that in more detail. So if the committee's happy to agree to a small working group, Donna and I would support that working group with Poppy and work with them, and then we can bring a report back to this committee that hopefully has all the information in it you need to make a decision. But it's your choice.
Just quickly.
Yeah, very quickly, Marion.
Well, it's on the same thing that I'm doing now. At the end of the day, the only thing that I would recommend from that 2008 was, why on earth has this taken all long? And perhaps it is the time that we took the bull by the horns, and there isn't one councillor that can't go to any outside body and say, would you like me to be a trustee? You don't need a title to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Rin. I've got quite a list of members wishing to speak, 4 in total. I've got Councillor Hinder next on my list.
Thank you, Chairman. I think if you go back over the years, you will find we did a very similar working group. We came to exactly the same conclusions as we're coming to now. I think, Councillor Joy well remembers it. When it was actually presented, I think several councillors I'm not going to say which group they came from, were very much against some of the things being withdrawn, which made us look absolute idiots considering we put so much work in. And we had interviewed several councillors, you'll probably remember this. So I feel a little bit apprehensive about this, but there are some questions, Mr. Chairman, that I would like to ask. I would like it to be considered, what are the actual advantages of a councillor actually being on an outside body? Do we actually still give funding to these outside bodies as used to be, which seemed to be very much the thing at that time for them to be, for us to be on there, because we were actually giving funding to that group, which maybe we don't give anymore. I know for one thing, Maidstone Beauvais doesn't have any funding, but we do get the use of the room because of the links with the mayor. So I would ask, please, Angela, that that can be brought back to this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hinder. Councillor Revel.
Done it. Can I just have some clarification on this? You're talking about outside bodies. Actually, what is your definition you're working at as to what... There are two questions. So the first one is, what is your definition of an outside body? How did you determine... I mean, I belong to an outside body, but I don't think I want you coming round to investigate my outside bodies. That's...
Outside bodies are external organisations that we, as a council, nominate representatives onto. So there may be things that councillors do in their own right, and there's some council, for example, I know are trustees, but they're not there as the council representative. So they're those organisations we choose to make a nomination to represent the council and be on those bodies. That's the definition we're working to. So there's a whole list. Appendix A of the report does list all of the outside bodies as we consider them at the moment. They're all included on that list.
So the second point is, are these outside bodies autonomous? In that case, why? Surely we should ask them if they want a councillor on their body, and because I don't think the council should put their heavy foot on these bodies and say we're sending somebody down to your. If they want somebody on, I mean, normally what would happen is that Joe Bloggs would come to me and say, would you like to come and join my committee? And that is done on an informal way. And I think that's the right, we're a free country. We don't want to be dictated to. We have got a list, haven't we, already, of which we've got representation, and they want us, if not. If you know already who the outside bodies are, why are you telling me you're going to have to investigate it again?
The issue is, I believe, having picked this up, is we have a number of outside bodies with vacancies. So we have outside bodies we're appointing to, which actually no one wants to sit on. However, the organisation might want us, but perhaps our councillors aren't going to. And there is a question as to how much value there is in being on those outside bodies. And that's for this committee to look at and decide, actually, is that an organisation we want to be appointing to or not? And then if we do appoint to them, shouldn't the people who are appointed be reporting back and saying, this is what I'm getting out of it, I'm telling you about this organisation, I'm sharing it, it's a two-way relationship. And I think that was explored in the original report.
Councillor Revel, I'll let you come back once more and then we'll have to...
Can I just now make my final point? Are we now going to say that we're going to set up an organisation which dictates to councillors which organisation they go to? Because all of this is farcical. If you're already saying the councillors are not going to these sorts of places because they don't want to, well, that's their prerogative.
No, you don't have to go.
Well, no, we're actually talking about dictating about which list should have a councillor representative.
No.
I think that point has been addressed, Councillor Revel. I'll move on and perhaps we can come back and address those. I've got Councillor Newton next.
Thanks, Chairman. Going through the ones that I mentioned earlier on this evening, the Maidstone Cycling Forum is very new, and they lobbied Heritage, Culture and Leisure to have some support. They haven't responded, but they're a very recent addition to Maidstone Borough Council's group. They are active, as you can see from cyclists around, the cycling in Moat Park and all over the place. But I think I'd like to see them put back on the list that we left them off. The other one is the street pastors, because they do a great deal in this town on Friday nights, Saturday nights. Went to the visit, to the what we call the visitor economy. They give their time up free to help people, and I think they should be on the list that we do support. And the other one, which gets quite a lot of media attention, is the Medway Valley Rail Partnership, because there have been councillors on this council that have done a great deal to improve the Medway Valley, which is now a very, very busy piece of line. But I would suggest that those three get put back on that list that we support.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. I've got Councillor Vizard next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think, from my point of view, we've got the list of outside bodies that we've got there. And I think, from a review point of view, what we need to do is just ask the outside, or find from the outside bodies, what is the council's legal statutory obligation to outside bodies. And that was where we asked for the legal department in the first place. And I think when Councillor Ring brought this up, also moving on from that, I think if they are to stay, then what we need to do is the people that are appointed to the outside bodies, we need to find from the outside bodies what their obligation is, whether they're voting trustees or just a simple guideline of why they're there. And they should come under the service committees, and they should report back to the service committees, and the service committees should ask the representatives to report back there. And in respect to the question that we raised previously with the outside bodies that were there, and we didn't get any response from a lot of them, maybe we should make a direct response this time, not just send them an email or a phone call. Maybe we should approach them and just say, do you still want us to represent you? And if you, I don't know how far down that road we went with that.
I'll ask us come in on that first point you made, Councillor Vizard.
I don't disagree with you at all. We definitely need to find out what our legal obligations for being on the outside bodies are, because there are some that we will have a legal obligation through trust deeds, and that's what we need to explore. And that's the reason we have suggested that we have a more in-depth review, like the scrutiny review that took place before, so that we can try to come to some conclusion on this. Because at the moment we have a number of outside bodies, we have a number of vacancies, and obviously we have the outside bodies because we've been requested to go on them at some point. But we're not able to fulfil all of the obligations because we just don't have the members to sit on all of those bodies that are out there. So, the review is really important. We need to find out what our legal obligations are, and there's going to be historical information about some of those outside bodies that as a group of members you will know about, which as officers, I'm very new to Maidstone. I don't know the history to why we're on an outside body, which is why we're asking for member input into the working group rather than it just being officer-led, because you have something to input that we don't have.
Thank you, Donna. I've got Councillor Joy, and then I've got a few members wishing to speak a second time. But I'll start with Councillor Joy.
I just wanted to say that what our legal officer has just said, I think is the only way forward for us. And I think we should just now, instead of keep talking about it, which we've been doing now for years, to get on with the work, have a small working group working with Angela or whoever it is, and get it sorted out. I'm not happy with what's on the paper, but when I'm asked as a councillor why I think street pastors is important and why I go to every meeting, I will be able to reply, and then it will be down to us when that information comes back to us, whether they're ones we keep or whether we do something different. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ring, do you want to come in?
I'd like to come in. Another thing that I've picked up on it. In our meeting of the Chi Committee next month, we're going to be looking at all the service level agreements. So I think we need to look at, I think this working group, if that's the way we're going to go forward, and I think we need to be positive, and I think we need to come back up with an answer after all these years, because it makes us look foolish. We're not getting anywhere. We never put this list down to say we didn't care. What we were looking at was less staff that we've got. What is it you're bringing to the council? After people didn't even reply out of decency. So, two things I'd like to see. I'd like to see the service level agreement list completely separate, because I think that would take more legal input than the rest of them. To put out to people, it isn't that we don't care, we just need to know why we are doing it. And the third one is, I think these could be broken down to information. Are you a group that make decisions? You come to the council and you lobby on that behalf? And just to get round to every councillor, Denise, that list on there saying about the street pastors, if I knocked that off 1,000 times, which I wouldn't, you'd still go, because it's in your ward and you care. And where some of the things that I'm on, I'd go because it interests me and I care. I don't have to use the officers to tell me what to do. I know when to declare. I check that with legal, which I've already done about one thing. But all I'm saying is we just got to stop being silly about it. And do you not think that our meetings are long enough as it is? You've got meetings with people, with 9 people on there, and you're telling me 9 people want to hear about when you went to the bus pass meeting. Because I don't think it'd mean anything to anybody who wasn't using a bus pass. Sorry to be so hard. That working group, if that's the way you go, I think we need to be sensible on it, and we're quite intelligent enough to write our own letters. We might just kindly ask Poppy to dot it out for us. But if we're going to take this on, we do it and we send it from this committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ring. I'm mindful of the fact that I've got Councillor Hinder, Councillor Fissenden and Councillor Revel left, and that we've been around the room once and these are people speaking for a second time. If you don't want to speak, Councillor Fissenden, that's helpful. So I'll come to Councillor Hinder and then Councillor Revel, and then we'll look to wrap up this agenda item.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I agree with you. I think we've actually discussed this enough tonight. I would just like to point out, and we're going back again, when I first came on the council, if we went on an outside body, we were expected to send in, and I've seen people nodding, send in a report telling the council what we had done in that year. And that was set in stone. We did it. If you're a responsible councillor, you did it. Somewhere along the line, that's got dropped. So if we're going to keep some of these, we want to be incredibly strict to the council who takes that on and says, we do need to know every year what you're doing on there. I think a lot of the problem that we identified many years ago on general purposes was that councillors didn't have an interest in a particular group. So I think to them, they thought, well, what's the point of being on here? I can't give them anything. I can't bring anything back to the council. So maybe that was the reason why it's declined over the years, and it has declined rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hinder. Councillor Revel.
I should have declared an interest. I've got a bus pass.
If there's... That is noticed, Councillor Revel. If there's no other members indicating to speak again, we will look towards bringing this to a conclusion. In the absence of anything being proposed from the floor, I will look towards the recommendations on the papers on page 44 of your agenda. recommendation 1 to revisit the decision made on the 8th of September in light of the information in the report, and recommendation 2 to create a working group to review the appointments. I'm going to ask legal a question, if you don't mind, on this. Do we need to, this committee, decide the composition of that working group at this point? Or we shall ask for volunteers? Okay, that's fine. I will take the vote first, as I've been advised. So, we obviously have the 2 recommendations, which I will take together on the report in front of us. Anyone, I'm happy to propose from the chair. Anyone willing to second that? Councillor Fissenden. Super. In that case, can I have all of those in favour of the recommendations on the paper in front of us on page 44? I think that's 7. Those against? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I don't think we caught Councillor Newton or Councillor Ring's intentions. Perhaps we should have introduced our electronic voting halfway through the meeting. But I'll take that again for the sake of clarity. Can I have all of those in favour of the recommendations on the paper in front of us? In favour. That is unanimous. Fantastic. And now we can talk about the composition of the working group. If any volunteers would like to come forward. I see Councillor Ring. I'm not sure. Oh, hello. We have. I'm going to have to ask legal on this. We can have as many as we like. So those members who would like to nominate themselves to the working group.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Why not leave the whole committee on and be selective when we start looking for them? If you want 2 people, take 2. If you want 4, take 4, as from the committee.
Here's the resolution going forward. I will speak separately outside the meeting to Donna about the issues that you've just raised, and we'll report back to the committee via email, if that's okay with everyone. If Councillor Revel wants a delivery, he can have a delivery. I will report back via email, and we will take it from there. Or we'll put it in a pigeonhole. Members, thank you very much for attending tonight. That is the end of the items on the agenda. We're here as it's the last meeting before Christmas. I wish you all a happy Christmas, and thank you for your work over the year, and to the officers as well. And a good new year, and we shall see you all in January, if not before. Thank you very much.